Good morning and welcome, dear friends. Welcome to our spiritual home, the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tarpon Springs. My name is Barbara Rosen, and I'm serving as your worship associate today. I use she, her pronouns, and am an older white woman. I have white hair, green eyes, the tendency to drop things, and blue and green shirt. I hail from the Seneca Nations in Upper New York, and we want to acknowledge that here at the church we are on the lands of the Tocobaga and Seminole peoples. We are a church of many welcomes, and we offer a warm welcome to each one of you. This is a liberal community for all ages, promoting spiritual growth, social justice, and the arts. To learn more about our events, our church calendar is on our website, uutarpon.org, or we'd be happy to talk with you during the coffee hour. For those present with us in the building, we have connection cards if you would like to fill one out and give us your information so we can stay in touch with each other. There are also small cards near the hymnals. We do joys and concerns at the end of the service if you prefer to do one in writing that we will read here. Our minister, Reverend Kristina Spaude, leads today's service, Many Paths to One Flame, Our History. Bonnie Whitehurst and our choir will bring us the music. The first piece of music is a meditation on breathing, number 1009 in the Teal hymnal.
This is a song in 3 parts. Each part is repeated, so we'll go through it with you and review each part, and then we'll do it one additional time with all 3 parts at one time. So as we're going through it, you can pick a part that you really like, and then the second time you'll stick with that part.
I am the Reverend Kristina Spaude. I use she, her pronouns, and am a white woman. I am tall with shoulder-length curly brown hair, parted on one side, and blue eyes. Our opening words this morning come from Marnie Harmony. This is "We whose journeys are always beginning." We whose journeys are always beginning. We whose mission always awaits us. We whose visions are bent on loving. We gather together here. We gather as a community drawn together out of common need, each toting our own carpet bag of treasures and dreams. We gather together seeking meaning, yearning to understand life in all its dimensions, as it challenges and expands, as it burdens, as it consoles and heals. We gather together with questions, the kinds of questions that provoke us to the path of action. We gather with hope, the kind of hope that pulses on through uncertainty. We gather with tenderness, the kind of tenderness that can only be born from knowing human capabilities as well as human imperfections. We gather wanting certainty and having none, but we are wakeful to possibilities as we seek discernment and gentle judgment. We gather then unbounded, but close. We gather thirsting. We gather drawn to our source, our Creator, and each other. Come, let us worship together.
We light our chalice with these words from Andrew Pakula. Let there be light, the light of joy, the light of happiness, and the light of contentment. May it illuminate our paths and fill our lives with peace. And let there be dark, for it is from our dark places that we are brought forward, tried and tested, and impelled toward growth. It is in these places that we realize compassion and learn to love. And there was day and there was night, and there was joy and there was sorrow, and it was good.
Yep, Unison Covenant maybe.
We join to read the covenant. We strive to look for and encourage the best in each other
as we move toward
justice, peace, and love for both ourselves and the world.
And when
When we fall short, we will seek understanding, reconciliation, and return to covenant.
Page 1, 2, 3 in the Great Book.
So today's service is kind of a crash course in European Unitarianism. We're starting with our story this morning, which is titled Faith is the Gift of God by Heather B. MacDonald, which I have adapted. 400 years ago, even more than that now, There was a little country tucked in among the high mountains of Hungary called Transylvania, or the land through the forest. The king of that land was John Sigismund. Crowned king when he was only 21 years old, he was already brave and thoughtful, and he needed to be, for he and his little country had big troubles. King John's father died of an illness when King John was just a baby, so he had to make his way without his father. His mother, Isabella, however, had been raised by her parents to be a good and wise ruler to her people before her marriage to John's father, so he was taught well. As a boy, John was never very strong or healthy. He often felt dizzy or weak or had a stomach ache, but he did not give in to these feelings any more than he could help. He learned to play all the sports that the other young men at his court enjoyed, such as sword fighting, horseback riding, and deer hunting in the forest. King John's country was right next to two large, powerful countries that fought with each other a lot. King John worried because he did not want his little country to get into their quarrels. But even worse than that, King John's own people often fought with each other in this land through the forest. They fought because they belonged to 4 different kinds of churches. The churches were Roman Catholic, Lutheran, Calvinist, and Unitarian. The people in each church said, "Our ideas about God and Jesus and what a church should be like are the only true ideas. Everyone," they thought, "should believe what our church tells them to believe." People only wanted to believe in the teachings of their own church. Sometimes people fought with words, arguing and saying the worst things that they could think of about each other, whether they were true or not. Other times, the church had members in government who fought by taking people's jobs away or people's money. Often, people were put in prison or even put to death. When times were at their worst, people even tried to kill King John himself because they hoped that a new king might make their church the one true church. Actually, this kind of fighting about churches happened a lot in countries in that part of the world at that time. King John thought for a long time, and then he made a decision. He called the best speaker from each church to come to a place called Torda for a debate instead of a fight. A debate is an argument with rules. Each person takes a turn to speak about their ideas. There is no quarreling because only one person speaks at a time. A judge decides who has the best ideas. The debate began each day at 5 o'clock in the morning, and it lasted for 10 days. The speaker from the Unitarian Church was a man named Francis David. He argued that no one has the right to force people to believe anything about God. After 10 days, King John ordered the debate to end, but he did not announce a winner. He did not say that any of the 4 churches was the best. This probably surprised many people. King John did listen to the argument of Francis David, though, that no one should be forced to believe any religion, but should be able to choose for themselves. Then King John made an important announcement that was called the Edict of Torda. The edict told the people that from that time on, his subjects could debate about their ideas of religion, but they must not fight, punish, or kill each other about religion. It's a pretty low bar, I feel like, but you know. Every church and every person would be free to follow their own beliefs. This was a new and strange idea for those times in Europe, and many people were angry with King John for this law, but he stuck to it. Unitarians especially remember King John because his law made it safe for them to be Unitarians. All 4 religions were made official in Transylvania. Transylvania is now a part of the country of Romania, where there are still Unitarian churches, the oldest Unitarian churches in the world, where Unitarians gather to worship still. At this time, we will sing our children to their programming with Jami, and as we do, I'm going to light this candle to represent the light and love of this community. And we will sing hymn number 413 in the gray hymnal, Go Now in Peace.
Now in peace, go now in peace. May the light of love surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go. Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the light go surround you. May the light of love surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go.
A purpose of our church is to encourage all who gather here to grow more generous in spirit and in action. We now take an offering that allows us to exercise that all-important generosity of spirit, an offering that will support this self-supporting church and its many ministries. The gifts of the congregation will most gratefully be received. The next piece of music, From You I Receive, number 413 in the gray hymnal. 402 in the gray.
From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live.
Each week before our moment of silence, I offer some words for reflection if you would like to think about them during our time. Today, the words come from the Quran, from Surah 49, verse 13. O humanity, indeed we created you from a male and a female and made you into nations and tribes so that you may know one another. We will take a moment now and hold silence together, allowing you to settle into yourselves and your seats. You might take a few breaths deep into your belly if that is comfortable for you. Our reading today is an excerpt from the Reverend James Ford's God is One, Francis David, Reformation and Unitarianism, and some of its possible significance for contemporary UUs. Together with learning of Transylvanian Unitarians, we have discovered one of the most compelling spiritual figures, frankly, of world religion. Here we are presented with a fierce intellect and questing spirit, a religious leader and social rebel with, in my opinion, more substance, certainly more intellectual and spiritual rigor than either Calvin or Luther, or any of the rest of the Reformation gang. We have found, thanks to these connections with Hungarian-speaking Unitarians, not a distant cousin of whom we can be proud, but an exemplar, a pointer of the way, a teacher and guide on our own way. We have discovered Francis David, and with him, we get a cast of characters and a story that more truly than most is our story. Francis David was born at the beginning of the 16th century in Kolosovar, today Cluj, in the kingdom or principality of Transylvania. Kingdom from the perspective of the Transylvanians themselves, principality in fact as they were within the thrall of the Ottoman Empire. His father was a shoemaker, but his mother came from Hungarian nobility, so he had social access. His intellectual capacities were recognized early on, and patrons supported his education, even sending him to Wittenberg for 4 years for advanced studies, after which he was ordained a Catholic priest. Spiritually restless and intellectually rigorous, he chafed at the strictures of the Catholic faith, eventually converting to Lutheranism. What I really love about this story is how he is so typical of current UUs who are like, oh, I went here, and then we went here, and then I went here, and then I found my way here, and then he's just like us. So he converted to Lutheranism and quickly was elected the Lutheran bishop for Transylvania. Under the influence of George Biandrata, physician to the king and significant spiritual intellect in his own right, David continued to wrestle with his faith and eventually declared for the more rationalist Calvinism, then quickly becoming the Calvinist bishop of Transylvania. The evolution of his faith continued. He and Dr. Biandrata found themselves deeply influenced by the Spanish anti-Trinitarian Michael Servetus and the great Dutch humanist philosopher Erasmus. Among the problems for David was the lack of any scriptural clarity around the nature of the Holy Spirit, and with that, the whole idea of God being described as a Trinity. In the meantime, Dr. Biandrata arranged for his friend to be appointed court preacher. His command of the scriptures, his eloquence both in pulpit and in debate, and with his ability to speak in equal eloquence Hungarian, German, and Latin, it appears no one was able to meet him head to head in disputation. And significantly, gradually, actually not that gradually, Francis David's preaching and eloquence became more and more obviously anti-Trinitarian. It probably felt a lot like that. These questions and disputes gradually spread beyond the court. It may be hard in our time and place to understand how powerful and compelling these questions were, or the physical danger that accompanied questioning such bedrock assumptions, an area that neither Luther nor Calvin ever dared go. Reverend Ford continues with some information about the Edict of Torda, notes that there were mysterious circumstances surrounding King John's death, and that he was succeeded by a Catholic. Persecution began then, while David's thinking continued to evolve. Biandrada became afraid for their new church and joined with others to denounce David, who was trained and convicted of heresy. He died in prison shortly thereafter. So I hope that you are all buckled into your seats because I have gone full on into my nerddom for this service. There is so much, writes the Reverend Eric Cherry in a UU World article from 2017, that the Edict of Torda points to that our current tradition continues to rely upon. The grounding commitment that faith is not endowed with purpose by governments or empires, but by the sacred, the holy. That a free pulpit and a free pew are necessities for free religious communities. Even the stirrings of our commitment to resist authoritarianism as a religious practice is signaled in the edict. He continues that the 450th anniversary of the Edict of Torda is an opportunity to look back and remember foundations and commitments that can be touchstones for the faithful struggles ahead. The Edict of Torda is one of those reliable sources of power and inspiration. There is no need to romanticize history, though. It is clear to 21st century UUs that the Edict of Torda did not go far enough, but it was an important step on the pathway of reform and freedom that continues today. Radical in its time, he was martyred for his steadfast commitment to the work of unending reformation. David's particular commitment provides inspiration, not a destination in our own. Beyond these matters of faith and practice, the anniversary of the Edict of Torda calls American Unitarian Universalists to know themselves better by celebrating the history of the world's first Unitarian churches. Our international partners in Transylvania, Hungary, and around the world understand the edict as their moment of birth and establishment, as a basic part of their spiritual DNA. Let us take this anniversary as a chance to understand our partners and our history more completely, to celebrate the radical reform spirit that is at the basis of the Edict of Torda, and to translate that spirit into lives and ministries of purpose today. The 16th century was a wild time for religion in Europe. In 1517, Martin Luther, a German teacher and monk, accidentally set off the Protestant Reformation when he famously nailed his 95 Theses, the disputation on the power of indulgences, to the door of a church in Wittenberg. While some of these theses he proposed were controversial to church teachings, others were simply an attempt to call the church back to its own values. Specifically, Luther took a great issue with the too common practice of selling indulgences. When people sinned and conveyed this to a priest in this era, they were given the option of paying for full or partial forgiveness of their sins. That is, people could pay a fee to reduce or cancel their penance. Some of this was to support wars that the church had initiated, like the Crusades, to support other church needs, and of course there were priests and higher-ups who were lining their own pockets. What was worse was that this practice of selling indulgences, the fees to reduce or cancel penance, had evolved into a related practice, that of buying indulgences for loved ones who presumably were in purgatory after they had died, to release them from their church-mandated penance in the afterlife. Now, Catholic clergy were offended by Luther's accusations, and this began an unraveling of the Catholic Church's hold. Luther himself continued to evolve in his thinking from his initial critiques, realizing that salvation is free. He was a small U universalist and required nothing, least of all money, to get it. While the criticism of indulgences and some of the theology related to them were within the church's doctrine and practice, the underlying theology that guided Luther is why he was later excommunicated. His understanding of salvation was radical, and related to it was the belief that there needed to be no intermediary between people and God, a role that the church had long assumed for itself. Luther's challenges to the Catholic Church on the matter of indulgences set off a series of challenges about practices and theology, from questioning infant baptisms to the Holy Communion to Henry VIII's choice to create a new church when the Pope would not grant him an annulment for the first of his marriages. So this is broadly what was happening in Europe in the decades leading up to the Edict of Torda. By that time, Catholicism was still popular, but now also had to contend with Lutheranism, Calvinism, and other denominations to seat their pews and fill their coffers. And not surprisingly, as new faiths emerged and were establishing themselves, there was a lot of fighting and politicking and trying to claim territory. And did I mention fighting? Both over theological and spiritual matters as well as physical ones. It's like when you've got a sibling that is pretty similar to you, but enough different, and you bicker all the time. And of course this was happening since these denominations were all basically less than 50 years old and figuring out who they were and wanted to be. Okay, so this is the stage for the Edict of Torda. Well, it's part of the stage for the Edict of Torda. Another piece of the stage is what the Reverend Dr. Susan Ritchie noticed, that geography, history, and empire also mattered. Ritchie realized that all of what I shared about these religions was part of the story, but that something still tugged at the corner of her mind. Ritchie writes about Transylvanian Unitarianism and the context of the edict in her book, Children of the Same God, the historical relationship between Unitarianism, Judaism, and Islam. So we're going to look at some maps, because I really went full into my nerdum. So most of Europe is, where you think it is. There's Spain and France and England, but like this chunk here in the middle is the Holy Roman Empire. And then over here, less Poland. Poland like moves back and forth all across the year 1000 to now. But the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth up here. Down here is the Ottoman Empire. And here is Transylvania, right here. Transylvania also kind of shifts, but not a lot, because it turns out you don't move a lot when you're just in mountains with trees. Okay, and the next one, please. And so this is kind of a reverse. It took me a minute to process this map. This is reverse. So Spain and France up here, and Africa down here. And all of this in green is the Ottoman Empire, including Transylvania right up here. And we've got Constantinople right here. So you see that it's kind of at the near central-ish part, but not really. But the Ottomans have also taken over all of these other areas as well. And this was the greatest extent of the Ottoman Empire, which was in 1566. It helps me to process things when I can see them on a map. So if you're like me, there you go. What Ritchie realized and had been noticed, she realized, which had been overlooked by many of the people who had told the story of how the edict came to be, according to her research. What had been overlooked is that Transylvania was part of the Ottoman Empire, which we see on the map now, but people weren't thinking about. They were thinking about Transylvania as it exists now in Europe. The Ottoman Empire existed from 1299 to 1918. It was dismantled at the end of World War I. Like other large empires, the Ottomans granted varying degrees of autonomy to their subject nations. Throughout the 16th century, the Ottoman Empire was fighting with its neighbors as it sought to expand. In 1566, the empire reached its peak size geographically. There was no mass effort to convert people to Islam or Christianity as there had been in other parts of Europe. Spain is a prime example of that, but it happened elsewhere too. So for example, the capital of the Ottoman Empire was, for most of its history, Istanbul or Constantinople, which I'm sure some of you have a song going through your head about now. The former center of Christianity for the Orthodox. The Ottomans took Constantinople and renamed it more than 100 years before the Edict of Torda. And while there was some effort at Islamicizing it, most people were largely left in peace to practice their faith, whether it was Christianity of whatever variety, Judaism, or Islam. It is entirely possible that all of this was more about the Ottoman approach to governance than it was about anything else. Like the Romans, who largely allowed people to do their own thing in the places that they lived, the Ottomans also did. So Christianity, Judaism, and Islam coexisted under the Ottoman Empire as it was in Transylvania as well. And the three faiths coexisting matters not only for the Edict of Torda, but also the way Unitarianism evolved in Transylvania. But, as Ritchie writes, the grounds for religious toleration affirmed by the Edict of Torda were prepared by the everyday lives of actual people who were already living in a multi-religious way. It was common for interreligious marriages to take place and for families then to be multi-religious. One example she gives is of a family where the boys were raised under one religion and the girls were raised under the other of the parents' religions. There was even a small group of Jews in Transylvania called Zeke Jews who had been Unitarians and had adopted Jewish practices as an extension of their Protestant convictions. They represent the only instance of an entire community adopting Judaism without historic or genealogical ties to the tradition, according to Ritchie. The Unitarian and Jewish connection unfortunately reinforced both anti-Unitarian and anti-Jewish persecution. All of this was possible in part because Transylvania was a kind of geographical borderland, surrounded by various Christianities, Judaism sprinkled throughout, and Islam as another neighbor and religion of those in power. Because of its geography not being central in Europe or the centers of strong religious identity, like the Vatican in Rome, or Calvin's Geneva, or Luther's Germany, Transylvania was a place where people of different backgrounds came together and where progressivism was welcomed. Ritchie notes, positioned on the doctrinal border of Christianity, Unitarianism often found that its nearest theological kin were not Christian. Unitarian identity in Europe emerged as a defense of the inherent kinship between Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. Thus, Unitarianism was multicultural and multi-religious from its beginning. Michael Servetus was one of our theological ancestors who was executed by the order of John Calvin in 1553, so a little before the edict was issued. But his work influenced some in Transylvania and many elsewhere. He argued against the Trinity, a wildly and decidedly unpopular argument in that era in Europe, partly because the Trinity is an offensive doctrine for Jews and then later Muslims. The idea of the Trinity actually separates Christians from their faith siblings, as was grounded in the Council of Nicaea. A generation of theologians followed Servetus's thinking, though, including Giorgio Biandrata, a court physician who had considerable influence on Francis David, to whom the words, "We need not think alike to love alike," are attributed, although he never said them. Biandrata was greatly influenced by Servetus and was interested in creating an intentional Unitarian church from the various anti-Trinitarian theologies around. Biandrata and David both influenced the young King John, as did his mother, Queen Isabella, who was also influenced by them. As noted in The Time for All Ages, she was raised well by her parents with a mind to fairness and humanism, that is, teachings of the Greeks and Romans, not as we know humanism today. To whatever degree it would help the budding Unitarian movement in Transylvania that they shared the same one God as the Muslims of the Ottoman Empire, as well as that of the Jews. Monotheism gave subjects access to protection and legal rights in the empire. They had to pay a tax, but in return they were treated more or less as Muslim subjects. Stephen Prothero, in his book God is Not One, refers to Christianity as a soft monotheism, in that there is a belief in one God, but multiple manifestations of them. This is idolatry or blasphemy, according to Jewish and Muslim beliefs. This was kind of the point in that Council of Nicaea that I mentioned in 325, was meant to set Christianity apart from Judaism. So Unitarianism in this setting was perceived as distinct from other forms of Christianity. Toleration then, Ritchie notes, derived from Ottoman policy, Ottoman bureaucratic structure, and Ottoman interpretation of Islam, which was in most instances stunningly liberal, cosmopolitan, and pluralistic. Truth be told, Islam was in some ways a more progressive ally than other Christian sects, not only because of their mutual toleration and enmeshment, but also because Islam had no need to fight as Christian sects were doing. What Richie learned in her research is that the connection between Unitarians and Muslims has been both overlooked and equally deleted. There's the long-time strict division of East and West that has been fabricated, but also the strict separation of Christianity and Islam. In addition, Hungarian church historians have vehemently denied a relationship existing between the two religions. Turkey and Hungary have historically been enemies, and it has been hard to think of the Ottomans, who were Turks, as something other than just violent and oppressive for the Hungarians. While today we can look at this history and the intermixing to be beautiful and rich, at the time it was not experienced that way by many Europeans. They were afraid of the Ottomans and Islam because people fear what they don't know or understand. The Ottomans had been expanding their empire into Europe, and this was a cause for deep concern. And because of the Unitarian interest in and engagement with Muslims, they were also perceived as a potential threat by extension. So we've got Unitarians being perceived as problematic by both Christians because of their Jewish connection and by Christians because of their Muslim connection. Our siblings in faith have been around long before our own Unitarianism emerged in the US in the 1800s, but for the most part, we didn't really have a relationship with them until the 1990s, when the UUA's Partner Church program was launched. It has since been defunct. The Partner Church program was a collaboration that matched mostly American congregations with others in Transylvania and later around the world. The impact our siblings in faith have been having on our faith in these last decades is important. They have helped us understand ourselves in new ways with new possibilities. Instead of focusing on just not being Trinitarian because it's not scripturally founded, Transylvanian Unitarianism invites us to consider not being Trinitarian because it distances us from the Abrahamic faith siblings our faith has historically shared. Pluralism has a rich legacy in our US American Unitarian Universalist heritage that I'll get into more next time, but our European siblings have brought us so much, and they have brought us deep connections with Judaism and Islam that we didn't have otherwise. They have also given us heroes that are our own, as well as a long, difficult, honorable history of resistance and community that offer us instruction for these challenging times we now find ourselves in. It is worth remembering the gifts of the Edict of Torda that were given to Transylvania and Europe, but also worth remembering the lessons and stories of how it came to be. How we live our lives matters. When we celebrate diversity, theological evolution, living our values, and honoring both the past and the future, we are remembering and practicing the best of our faith. If you would please rise in body or in spirit and join me in singing our closing hymn, number 1043 in the Teal hymnal, Zeke Aldas, which of course we have to sing because it's from our Transylvanian siblings.
This hymn is in two parts. We are in light of not knowing what the transliteration is for this, we're going to ooh the first part all the way through, all of us. Then we'll sing part 2, and then we'll go back and you may ooh part 1 or sing part 2 with us. Either way.
Who doesn't love a song that requires instruction?
I think they all do.
In The Gift of Faith, Jean Harrison Newyar has written, "In the lore of ancient China, there is a story of a philosopher who was asked, 'Where is the road called hope?' He replied, 'It does not exist, but as people move upon it, it comes into being.' I invite you to continue moving forward on this path, this journey of hope and history with me."
We hope that you found meaning in today's service. We close with these words from Vanessa to Tang. Like the flame of our chalice, may the flame in our hearts burn, remaining unextinguished. May it ignite our energies, our drive, our resolve to dream, to build, and to live into the world that good which exists for now only in our imaginings.